Inspirit Nutrition. Your brother, your friend, your dietitian, back again for another installment. What is Inspirit? To Inspirit. It's one of my favorite words. It's one of the most perfect words that I've come across to embody what I want to do with my work, what I want my work to embody. And so Inspirit is to enliven, to encourage, to fill with hope, to fill with zeal, to fill with vigor, to fill with determination. When someone is filled with hope, vigor, determination, zeal, when they're enlivened and encouraged, they do amazing things. They have the power. They become empowered. They can live their dream. They can change themselves. They can change their environment. They can change the world. And I think that's the true goal of education, of upliftment, of any type of human development, whether it's spiritual cultivation, mental, physical fitness, whatever it is, nutrition. It all comes down to inspiring, filling that person up with power, with capability, capacity. And I think that's what that's what my work is about. A lot of times people want to give people a certain program and kind of have them run on their selected program, but it's not about me filling anybody with anything that's foreign. Really, it's to kindle something that's already inside of people. And so in the beginning, it's stated in certain religious texts that man was filled with the Spirit, was given, life in that manner. And that's what Inspirit is, to give life. It's to give hope, to give determination, vigor, it's courage, enliven. I see it as a higher level of inspiration, even though they come from the similar root, because it comes from spirit is inspire and respiration all come from the root of spirit, and then spirit is life. And so when you enliven, you inspirit, you enliven. Then let's proceed with Inspirit, which comes from that root that we discussed, spiritus, breath, life, that animating principle that gives force and power to all of life. So if you plant and cultivate a garden, butterflies will come. What does that mean? Growing up as a youth in Los Angeles, my family had a sizable backyard. We had a nice sized backyard in West LA. And I remember during the seasons, as the seasons would change, sometimes my mother would plant a garden and she would cultivate the garden a little better and tend to the garden a little better than she would during other times of the year or during other years. And I was an observant child growing up. I would, play with the bugs and lift up rocks and do things with my brothers. We would always look at the roly-polies and the worms and all that stuff. And my dad used to also teach us about nature and have us, examine things in nature and kind of teach us lessons. And he kind of taught me how to see parallels in nature and then extrapolate those ideas and kind of gain an understanding. And what I witnessed growing up was that when we had a garden and we planted the garden and we cultivated it and tended to it, I would see things like garden snakes, green garden snakes, and I would see things begin to manifest that didn't exist prior. They didn't exist in that environment. And I saw butterflies come, beautiful birds coming, and I would see, this is in the middle of the concrete jungle in LA. So like I said, garden snakes, butterflies, caterpillars, and butterflies of all colors. Caterpillars, hummingbirds, beautiful, different kind of birds, different color insects, bright color insects, ladybugs, and the ambiance changed, the environment changed, and that's really a symbol and a sign for something greater. Because if you cultivate a plant and plant a garden within your own heart and your own mind, a spiritual garden, meaning you cultivate good thoughts, you cultivate good thoughts towards others, you speak good thoughts towards others and sincere thoughts towards others, and you cultivate certain actions, spiritual actions, doing things in a manner to not harm anyone and to help people. It creates a certain vibration. And I noticed that when it was a barren space in our backyard, there were no butterflies flying around, there were no ladybugs, there was no beauty, and there was no abundance. It was just a lack. It was just weeds, dirty, beat up grass, and dirt. And when our internal condition has no flourishing flowers, has no blooming flowers, and no flourishing plants, we're not going to have those internal feelings and positive emotions coming from that garden that we're cultivating. So when you're cultivating a garden of happiness, of patience, of positivity, you're going to have more virtues coming to you. If you plant and cultivate a garden, butterflies will come. Another thing is, financially or in the physical realm, if you keep things clean and in order, if you're budgeting, if you're planning ahead, if you're being thrift, and you're using your creative willpower, your creative will and your creative abilities to come up with designs to better your financial condition, you'll start seeing people who vibrate with that financial improvement, that advancement of your financial status. You'll have people coming into your life to aid you in doing that, because two things that vibrate at a different rate can't exist in the same space. So what comes with a beautiful garden? That beauty, that abundance, that vibration of those insects and plants, and the amazing, beautiful things that come along with that. The garden, the green garden snakes, and the beautiful things that come along with that. But if you have a mind state of lack and scarcity and self-hatred and fear for your brother, man, or your sister, then you're not going to have any butterflies. You're not going to have any bees. That's another thing. We have bees and wasps, just beautiful things coming into the garden. And I was like, when we didn't have that, they didn't manifest. It was like they came out of nowhere almost. Like, I used to think, did they fly from miles away coming to the garden? How did they know the garden is here? That's what I always used to think. Like, how does the garden snake know that the garden is here? Before, does he come here when the garden is not here? But I was always outside almost every day in my backyard, and I didn't see anything. And that's how it's going to be in your life when you plant a garden of positivity, when you plant a garden of self-love, when you plant a garden of financial abundance, when you plant a garden of physical health and physical wealth. You're going to start attracting that into your life. And actually, it'll just start manifesting. It'll seem like a miracle almost. So when you plant and cultivate a garden, butterflies will come. But you have to remember that you have to cultivate, and there's a waiting time. But when you plant something, the seed has all the potentialities of the garden, all the beauties of the garden are in the seed. The genetic makeup of the seed has a story written on those genes, and the story explains the beauty that's going to happen. So when you have that thought, that's the seed. That's the initial seed. And when you're telling yourself and you're repeating that thought and you're constantly having that thought, that's strengthening that thought, strengthening that seed. And then as you strengthen the seed, what happens? The seed starts to blossom. So it starts blossoming with your words. It starts blooming. And when you start speaking like the thoughts that you have planted. And then eventually your actions start changing. And then actions are the final step, because actions change the environment. If you just think and you speak, it's not enough to change the physical environment. In order to change the physical environment, you must act upon it. So as you begin to act upon it, then your conditions will start to change. Now, sometimes people get frustrated along the path because it's like, I'm making these changes, things aren't happening. But in a garden has to be cultivated. It takes time for the garden to flourish and bloom. It has to be tended to. So you have to constantly tend to your garden. If you want to become an actor, you're planting a new garden. You're planting a new seed. You have to tend to that. You have to hone your craft. Because right now I'm going through like a new phase in my life right now. I'm cultivating a new garden. and it's gonna be a giant garden. It's gonna be huge because the seeds they hold the potentialities of creating a huge, giant, flourishing garden. And sometimes I'm in the garden and on my knees and I'm cultivating the soil, and I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm hitting a brick wall, but I forget that that's an illusion. That time period that you're waiting before you become that actor, before you become that public speaker, before you become whatever you're trying to become, basically that's the time period between you planting the garden and you having the butterflies, the bees, the wasp, the beautiful things that come with it. That's just an illusion. That time period is like, it's illusory. It comes and it goes, it disappears, and eventually you're gonna have that garden. So really, it's just a matter of knowing, understanding, and then having patience, because it's inevitable. It's gonna happen. If you plant a garden, the butterflies will come. If you plant a garden, the bees will come. If you plant a garden, the beauty will come. The fragrances will come. So plant your garden. Cultivate your garden and enjoy the fruits. Enjoy the fruits of your labor. Enjoy the beauty. I was listening to Marcus Garvey this morning. He said, "Isn't it easier to enjoy prosperity rather than to live in ignorance and darkness?" A lot of times we're living in a barren, patch of soil, which is a metaphor for our life, for our scarcity in our lives. Whereas if we worked and planted and cultivated a garden, we would live in abundance. So you have spinach growing in the garden, tomatoes, fruit trees. It's just abundance of insects and plants and animals, and you're just living in a pure abundance. But we are living in the barren wastelands, thinking that it's better than or easier than living in prosperity. It's easier to enjoy freedom and prosperity. Even that little short time period of working is going to be eternally better than the life of nothingness, the life of darkness and ignorance and poverty. And poverty is internal, and it manifests outwardly. So plant your gardens. Your brother, your friend, your dietitian, back again for another installment. Speaking metaphorically, speaking spiritually, to Inspirit Nutrition. Your brother, your friend, your dietitian, back again. Peace and blessings. P.S. Don't worry. If you've planted a garden, it's universal law. There's no way possible the garden snakes, the beautiful garden snakes, won't manifest. There's no way possible that the fragrances won't manifest. There's no way possible that the butterflies won't manifest. The hummingbirds won't manifest. The caterpillars won't manifest. They are essentially one with the garden. They are essentially one. Those conditions, those attributes, those animals, those insects, those fragrances, that beauty, it's actually one with the garden. That is actually the description of a garden. That is the condition of a garden. So when you're cultivating and planting a garden in your heart, in your mind, and outside in your life for your children, for your family, when you're tutoring your children, you're introducing them to new educational concepts, when you're taking them to those science camps, when you're doing the different things you're doing for them, you're drinking more water, you guys are eating more fruit, you guys are living a healthier lifestyle. It's impossible. It's against universal law that those conditions that vibrate, that come with that, are not going to manifest. It's impossible. So have no worries. Fret not. You will do marvelous work. It's going to manifest. Give yourself permission to live your dream and go after it. What you start noticing is that you'll start seeing more butterflies. And this is all metaphorical, I'm speaking. In my life, along my path, I've seen more butterflies because I've planted a garden, now I'm walking in the garden. Now I'm walking in the garden that I planted previously. So I'm starting to see more butterflies, and they're nicer, more exotic colors. And that's what's going to happen to you in your life once you start planting more seeds and cultivating your garden and tending to your garden. You have to uproot weeds in your garden. So if there's anyone who is toxic to the garden, if there's any thoughts that are toxic to the garden, that's the first step. The thoughts that are toxic, which are weeds, and they take life from the garden, take nutrients from the garden, prevent it from expanding and growing. You have to uproot those weeds and focus on your weeds first, because if you start focusing on weeds of other people, it's not going to work, because they can't exist in your environment if you don't have those weeds within you. Those weeds that you see outside of you are in the form of persons, are reflections of the inner weeds. So take care of your own garden, tend to your garden, and you'll start seeing more butterflies. You'll start smelling the fragrances. This is all metaphorical. So you'll start seeing the fruits of your labor. That's what I'm essentially saying, metaphorically stating. And like I said, it's more beautiful to live in an abundant, rich garden than to live in a barren wasteland. And it's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of patience. So just smile and keep working in your garden. Peace.